Hello, thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Optimize Sales Through Merchant Processing. My name is Kelly Blount and I'm the Program Marketing Specialist here at General Electric Credit Union. We're so glad you've joined us as we have a lot of great content ahead. Thanks to technology, we're excited to be able to connect with you on such a great topic and wanted to thank you all for tuning in from the comfort of your home, work, or wherever you may be today. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Janie Weaver to introduce herself and today's guest speaker.
Hi, I'm Janie Weaver, a business service support representative here in the business department at General Electric Credit Union, where I assist members with their business needs. I've worked at GECU for 18 years, and during this time, I have gained a wealth of knowledge and experiences with the positions I have held. Even though I am new to the business department, I have been involved in opening business accounts and assisting the members for a little over 5 years. If you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us directly anytime. Now I would like to introduce Jason Leyda. Jason has been in the Cincinnati financial services environment since 1990 after graduating from Miami University. His career spans 4 financial institutions, from a big regional bank to 2 community banks to General Electric Credit Union. Jason has taken what he has learned at the large bank and community banks and applied them to creating the Treasury Management Department here at GECU. He has lived in Cincinnati all his life and resides in Liberty Township with his wife Brenda of 29 years. They have 3 children who are recently graduated from college or currently in college. And in his free time, he enjoys volunteering and continuing to coach and referee youth sports. I now give you Jason Leyda.
All right, thanks, Janie, and thanks, Kelly, for organizing this webinar. So first off, I wanted to thank everybody for joining today. We started, as Janie kind of mentioned and Kelly mentioned, we started these series of webinars a few years ago to help educate not only our business members, but also the business community about certain topics. We feel as a credit union, it's important to us to educate as well as serve our members. The topic today that we're going to talk about is this thing called merchant processing, which we all have a guarantee that we've used it personally, but now as business owners or maybe future business owners, you want to understand a little bit more about merchant processing. And merchant processing is simply the ability to accept either a debit or a credit card as a form of payment. We all might take this as very simplistic because, of course, we all use credit cards and we all use debit cards. But as a merchant, we feel like being able to just kind of explain what merchant processing is, how the process works, what cost there is, what benefits there are, and so forth. So hopefully you'll find with this 30-minute or so presentation, you will have a better understanding of what merchant processing is all about. So with the agenda here, what we'll try to cover is kind of 5 topics. Does your business need to accept a credit or debit card as a form of payment? What is a merchant processor and how does it work? What are the different ways to accept credit or debit cards as a form of payment? We will see how that has changed tremendously over the years. And then number 4, what are the costs of accepting a credit or debit card as a form of payment? That is very important because unfortunately, there is a cost to the ability to accept these plastic cards, but as you'll see with some statistics coming up, it's very important. And then number 5, how do you decide which merchant processor to go with? So we will begin with, do you think you need to accept credit cards or debit cards as a form of payment? So as I was doing some research for this webinar here, I was kind of looking around the Cincinnati area and some of the trends that not only have I seen personally, but also that I've heard out there. And kind of this research here, the top left corner is something that is from TQL Stadium, which the local MLS soccer team goes to, or plays at, I should say, where I go to because I go to all their games. But they are completely cashless. I was in line purchasing an adult beverage this past Saturday, and there was a person in front of me who pulled out a $20 bill to pay for his popcorn or her popcorn, and unfortunately, the person there said, "Sorry, you need to pay with a credit or debit card." So they pulled another card out of their wallet and was able to pay it there. But So TQL is completely cashless. On the right-hand side, this little amusement park up north here called Kings Island. This is an article from 2021 that they also are going cashless. Back 30 plus years ago, I worked at Kings Island in the games department, and I remember stuffing all my aprons with a bunch of singles from all these people playing the different games or what have you. So seeing that they're cashless now makes complete sense. Not only is it much safer for those employees to carrying cash around, but it's also a lot cleaner and a lot easier for the consumers to spend their money. And then the bottom left there is a sign that I actually pulled off the internet, but it was at either a butcher shop or at a restaurant that says, "Hey, we are cashless, debit and credit cards only. 3 reasons for it: safer for our team, smoother service, and more time spent on coaching, not counting," which I find very interesting and very cool to see that. So here's some statistics that we pulled out of the internet here to kind of show you why we think it is important for businesses of all sizes to accept a plastic card. So back in 2021, consumers like myself have about 4 credit cards on average that they have. Consumers are willing to spend up to 100% more than when using a credit card. There's a radio financial person who is not a fan of using credit cards because he says that consumers spend too much money or maybe get out of their budget line when it comes to using a credit card, and he would much prefer either using a debit card that comes out of your checking account automatically or cold hard cash. However, as a merchant, you're always wanting the consumer like me to maybe have a second adult beverage at the soccer game, or maybe a second tub of popcorn, where if I was limited to the amount of cash in my pocket, then I might not be able to buy that additional drink or what have you. So a recent survey or study by the Federal Reserve found that, and also in 2021, credit cards itself made up 28% of all payments. So 1/4 of all payments were made with a credit card. That is the highest level since the study began, which was 2016. That does not include debit cards. Debit cards actually is even higher. And the next bullet point talks about that, where it says today's consumers use non-cash payments of almost 74% of all transactions, which honestly to me it seems like a little low. I think it's probably higher. But for what that stat is saying is that 3 out of every 4 transactions is used is not cash. So it's either credit or a debit card or Zelle or Venmo, or like what GECU has is called Pop Money through our online site and so forth. So most of it is non-cash. So the question you have to really ask yourself as a merchant is that, do you think not having the ability to accept a credit or a debit card as a form of payment could mean a potential missed sales opportunity? My kids, as Janie mentioned, I got 3 kids in college or out of college, and they don't have cash. They have money in their checking account, so they have debit cards, and they all have, well, I think 1 credit card each. But there's a certain generation that is just completely out of using cash. And as I look at my wallet this morning, I don't have any cash. I have a debit or credit card, so that could mean that if I try to go to a merchant and they don't accept a card, then you might not, unfortunately, get my business or my kids' business. Of course, online merchants, they must accept a credit or a debit card as a form of payment. Certainly, some of the merchants out there, they do allow to withdraw money out of your checking account directly, but online merchants like this little website called Amazon, you need a credit or a debit card. So it is just kind of showing that merchants all over the place are accepting and willing to take these plastic cards. The second to last bullet point there is business credit cards are increasing in popularity. For example, here at the credit union, I have a corporate credit card where the accounting group says, hey, listen, if you need something as an emergency, or if you want to buy pizza for your staff, instead of paying for it personally and then having that reimbursed, why don't you just go ahead and use a business credit card, which is in my employer's name, but also has my name on there. So you can go out there and buy, or just very simply go either buy pizza or maybe go to the local office supply store to buy some toner, for all of a sudden we realize we're out of toner. It just helps our accounting group to manage some of those smaller payments. So business credit cards are becoming much more common out there in the marketplace. Then lastly, cash will never really go away in its entirety. There are several countries that still work on the cash basis, but certainly trends show that the use of cash continues to slow, which I think that we would all would agree. So first off, I want to kind of back up and explain what the heck is a merchant processor and how does it work. So there's really 5 steps involved when I go to the local office supply store to buy some toner, for example. And the little chart, a little picture at the bottom kind of spells that out. But so when I go to the office supply store, I pull out my card and I either swipe it at the merchant, or I scan it, or I input it myself. And we'll talk about all those different ways shortly. Number 2, once that card goes through that machine, usually the authorization goes through a merchant processor. So the merchant has signed up with a merchant processor, who's pretty much the middleman between that merchant and the bank or the financial institution that card is drawn on. So the authorization goes through the merchant processor to the financial institution that the card is drawn on. Number 3, that financial institution then decides if that transaction is approved or not. And if approved, it holds the funds. So over at the card, sometimes if you have a credit card yourself or a debit card, you'll see kind of a memo post, which means that, hey, you made an authorization on this card. The funds aren't pulled from your account yet, or it's not charged to you yet, but there is an authorization. And that's what that is. Number 4, the decision then goes back through the merchant processor to the merchant. And then if approved, then the sale is made. It says approved, the receipt prints out and all that. If it's declined, it will tell you, and then the consumer needs to decide what they want to do, maybe try a different card. And then most importantly, at some interval, the merchant processor transmits the approved transactions in batches. And what we mean by that, so let's say at the local supermarket, pretty much everybody almost uses cards there. Well, at the end of the night, or maybe every few hours, the merchant processor pretty much closes or takes all the transactions from the terminals and decides, okay, I need to send this transaction over to Capital One. I need to send this transaction over to GECU. To all these different credit card companies, and then the money is then sent from that bank, from that FI, and goes back through the merchant processor over to you as the merchant. So then it lands in your checking account at some point, either in 24 hours, 48 hours. That we'll talk about some of those lead times here in a minute. So the merchant processor is pretty much the middleman between you as a merchant and me as a card holder, if that makes sense. So as I was kind of researching this, I think that we all know this, but it was interesting when we were kind of finding all the different ways that a merchant can accept a credit or a debit card as a form of payment. Long time ago, all these merchants needed to have some type of terminal at their store or at their office, where then a card is given, and or it's called in, and they type it in the little keypad there. But you can see there's a bunch of different ones out there too. So starting in the top left and then kind of going clockwise there, that is the typical machine that everybody kind of thinks about, where the merchant has the machine, you stick the card in, you punch some buttons, and so forth and so on. The middle one on the top row is the mobile stuff now, which we have a heating and air company who's a member here that talked to us, because the way that they were processing credit cards for their clients was just kind of clunky. So they would have a technician go out to, let's say, my house to fix my heating and air company or my heating and air unit. Once I was done, they would ask for payment, so I would give them my card. And then they would make a phone call back to the office and say, yeah, I got Jason's card here. I need to charge him $400. Here's the card number, 123. not the safest or the best way of doing that, or even worse, sometimes they would write down the card number and all the code on the back and the expiration date, and then drive it back to the office and then punch it in there. So they wanted to kind of streamline that and make me as a consumer a little bit more happier, a little more confident that they're not going to mess up my card, or they're not going to use my card for something else. Heck, they have that number as they're driving away. Couldn't they just stop by somewhere and buy something with it? But so there are mobile options that are out there now. So just using a mobile phone, they just stick a little, it's called a dongle of all terms, but you can use a dongle right there at my house or at out in the field, and away you go. We also have a lot of like flea market type vendors that do it that way as well. And all you really need is data, or you need a Wi-Fi to be able to do it. The next one on the top right there, over at actually Costco is very popular about this. You just kind of stick your card in front of the machine and it pulls. It's this touchless stuff that everybody's trying to get to. Let's see, clockwise bottom right here. Everybody now has mobile phones that you can stick your consumer card or your business card in a mobile wallet. So there are different machines that you can just hold your phone in front of it and it captures the data. Once again, it's touchless. Bottom middle, that's what's called a POS system, which I know that we've all seen. And so POS systems helps the merchant not only process merchant processing, but it might help them with inventory. It might help them with sales volumes for the end of the day. It might help them with how many soda pops do I have left, or what have you. So there are point of sale options there. And then the bottom left is a very popular one. It's putting a credit card in through the internet. So with these merchant processing, there's so many different ways of accepting cards. You just want to understand what your client base is really asking for, and how could you increase sales by accepting cards. So what are the costs of accepting credit or a debit card? First off, the first bullet point there, consumers love their rewards, which is true. I think if I say what's in your wallet, you all know what I'm talking about. Samuel L. Jackson is with hawks their cards with the Capital One, because what they do is they give a pretty nice cash back. I think it's 1.5% or 2% cash back. Here at GECU, we have rewards on our cards as well. So me as a consumer, I earn a little bit of rewards by using my card at these different merchants. The negative, though, and what we're talking about with you guys, is that who actually pays for those rewards? It is the merchants. It is anybody who accepts cards. So what we want to do is be very transparent what some of those fees are, how they're calculated, to be able to allow you to make some decisions in terms of how you accept these cards. So the big thing out there is what's called interchange fees. So interchange fees are the fees that the financial institution of the card being used, as well as the card network, charge to allow their card to be used. And also merchant processors, they also do charge some fees. So at the very bottom there, there's a little pretty picture there that we found and everything. It kind of spells it out a little bit. So over on the left side there, it says customer pays $100. So let's say that I'm going to that to buy some toner, and it costs $100. So the office store charges $100 for the toner that we need. Using this example only, and I'll explain why I mean that here in a second, then out of that $100, there are certain fees called as interchange fees that comes from the merchant. So in this case, the issuing bank, you are charged $1.75. So the issuing bank is the Capital Ones, because we love those rewards on the consumer side. So that's a fee that comes from the merchant. 14 cents, as an example, is the card network processor, which is either Visa or MasterCard or Discover or one of those, American Express. The 30-cent example there is the payment processor. So the merchant processor has a little bit of a fee there as well, to be the middleman between the merchant and the issuing bank or where the card is held. So then in this case here, my $100 purchase that I spent, I got charged $100 on my card. However, the merchant in this case only really receives $97.81. And all those kind of middle pieces are these interchange fees that I talked about. And the interchange fees vary big time, big time. There are dozens and dozens of different interchange fees out there, and it really all depends on what type of card. So is it a business card? Is it a consumer card? Is it a consumer card with some awesome rewards? Is it a debit card? Is it a, maybe it's a store-only card, so like the red card thing over at Target. So there's a lot of different interchange fees based on the type of card, the amount of transactions. Sometimes merchant processors might give a better fee percentage if it's a higher ticket item. How the card was used is something that merchants don't really think too much about. The reason for these interchange fees and the variation of them, a lot of it is dependent on the risk that is out there. So if swiping a card is less risky than punching it into the internet, because maybe some might fat finger it, or calling it in, or what's called card not present is the term that's used out there. So how the card is used is extremely important, and what information was collected. There's times when I go to a gas station and I stick my little card in the machine to fill up my tank, and it asks for my zip code. Well, there's a reason for that, because they want to try to get a lower interchange fee to make sure it's really me with my card. So the zip code actually helps with getting the cost of the interchange fees down for the merchant a little bit, because it helps with fraud mitigation. And then also you could have monthly or per transaction fees for different things, like the ability to accept cards, extra software options, POS options, which we'll talk about here, extra support, etc. And here coming up, we'll have some questions maybe ask yourself before you talk to potential merchant processors, so you can kind of get a better feel on how much it will actually cost you to accept a plastic card. All right, so how do you decide which merchant processor to go with? First off, there are lots of merchant processors out there. I actually Googled merchant processing a few weeks ago, and there are hundreds. There really is. Some of them have, as I say in the second bullet point here, some have sales consultants who can walk with you in deciding what is best for your situation. There are some that you can just do it online yourself. It's very easy to get set up through the internet. The costs might be a little higher. You might have questions about, well, can maybe someone talk to me about mobile options, or about setting up a shopping cart on my internet, on my online site. Some of these sales consultants can really help you in terms of helping you decide, and kind of walk with you when you decide how to accept cards, what ways, what type of cards, and so forth. Some merchant processors have dedicated service contact points. Well, quite honestly, others don't. I'm not going to pick on anybody, on any merchant processor out there, but I've heard some horror stories from some of the very, very, very large ones that you can just set up through the internet. One of them was actually telling me that their average ticket normally on a credit card is like $100, but they had someone who actually spent a whole bunch more. They spent several $1,000s, and they used a credit card. Well, those funds were held for quite a long time because it was abnormal activity for that merchant. So that person tried calling the merchant processor saying, hey, what's going on with held funds? And that person had a heck of a time talking to anybody. So you have to really ask, when you are deciding on merchant processing, if you want to go with it, talk about service contact. Hey, is there a 24/7? Is there chat? Can I talk to somebody, or what have you? Just emails and so forth. If you're a member of a chamber of commerce, often other members within the chamber may offer discounts on merchant processing for other members in that membership. And from what I've seen, they can be pretty good. So you may want to maybe investigate your local chamber to see, first off, how much does it cost you as a business to join that chamber, and then see about some of the benefits, including merchant processing, among other things. You can get discounts on, I don't know, insurance and all that kind of stuff, being a chamber member. But it might be worth it to sign up with a chamber and just pay an annual fee, where you might save enough on your merchant processing to offset that charge. Then lastly here, be prepared before talking or signing up with any merchant processor by thinking about the following questions on the next slide. So we have some questions here. You really kind of have to prepare yourself before you start talking with them. And here's kind of a few of them there. Number one, how would you like to accept credit or debit cards? Hey, you know what? I'm just an online merchant. I don't need a machine. I don't need that little doggle thing with the mobile world. I just want someone to be able to punch in their card through a shopping cart. Or you might be going to you're a vendor at a local flea market or a farmer's market, and I don't need all the fancy machines. I just want to be able to use my mobile phone. So just kind of think about, as we shared earlier, there's several different ways of accepting these cards, and you want to make sure that you have, number one, that it's cost effective for you, but then number two, that you're meeting your customers' demand based on how they expect to pay you. Number two, do you need different hardware to accept credit or debit cards based on your situation? So it kind of goes back to my first bullet point. Do you need a full-time machine or one of those machines that kind of carry around? You might not. If you have the mobile phone and you can do it through a mobile phone, well, you know what? You don't need one. Number three, do you have a cloud-based program that require you to use a certain merchant processor to integrate with that program? What I mean by that, QuickBooks is an example of a software program that helps businesses kind of keep track of their finances. And sometimes, the last I saw, that with QuickBooks, there is kind of a merchant processing kind of integration that goes along with QuickBooks. If you want to do it through QuickBooks, they would require you to do it through either their merchant processing program or a very select 2 or 3 processors. And really, that's because QuickBooks, for example, has spent a lot of time having all that integrated very, very nicely within their system. So they ask you to use their merchant processor. So you may want to kind of look at that if you do have a cloud-based program, and you would want that integrated very nicely. You want to see if there's preferred, or there's certain merchant processors that have to be used to have that integration happen. Number 4, how important is a sales consultant to assist in a discussion about your situation? I think it is important to have just a discussion with somebody. These sales consultants can not only find solutions, they can uncover maybe some needs you didn't think about. They can make sure that you're set up appropriately. However, if some of that is not that important, like for example, we had one that it was a one-time fundraiser, and they just wanted to accept cards at a local event or what have you, and they needed to be set up pretty quickly, so they could just go through someone online and get set up immediately. So having a sales consultant really wasn't that important for that situation there. Number 5, how important is easy and simple ongoing support? Something to very seriously look at, because like I said earlier, some of that support, the service aspect, may not be there if you really need them. So it's something to think about. And then the last one there, could a POS system assist your company with inventory, keeping track of sales, merchant processing, etc.? Several merchant processors do also have these POS systems. And these POS systems is not just merchant processing, but it does keep track of the sales. It does keep track of inventory. I worked at our church, my church's festival for the last several years, and we have a POS system there as well. And what that POS system does for us is it does keep track of, okay, how many bottles of soda pop do we have left? How many tickets did we sell for the raffle? All these different things. So a POS system, we use it for a lot of different things, and then we also use the POS system for merchant processing. So once I want to buy a soda pop at the festival, they flip the little screen over saying, all right, stick your card in here. Maybe if you want to throw a tip on there, you can, and away you go. But the POS system has really helped us at the church to kind of keep track of that, of what stuff, what food, what drinks we have left and everything. Some additional questions to ask. Hey, ask how quickly funds will be deposited in your checking account. There are some that it might take 2 or 3 days. So if you have the sale on a Monday, you might not see the funds in your account until Wednesday or Thursday. There are others that can get there within 24 hours. So it's something to ask the merchant processing as you start going down this avenue here. Ask if they will net fund or gross fund. And what I mean by that, going back to that example that we talked about with the toner, with that picture earlier. So if there was a $100 purchase that I made and the merchant only received $97 and change, some merchant processors will still give me or give you as the merchant the $100 a few days after I use my card. But then at the end of the month, they will tabulate all the fees for the entire month and then withdraw that out of your checking account. However, some of them will not give me the $100, or give you as the merchant will not give you the $100 right up front. They'll actually only give you the $97. It's 6 or 1/2 dozen. You're paying for it anyway, but that's something to ask to see how that would affect your accounting and your financials when it comes to either net funding or gross funding. Explain what industry you are in, as some merchant processors have higher fees or will not allow processing for certain industries. We're not going to get into a political discussion here. However, there are some industries that some merchant processors will just not allow. There are other merchant processors that will allow certain industries and so forth. So you want to find out if when you're out there searching for a merchant processor, if they will even allow to process for you based on whatever industry you're in. And then just maybe ask them, hey, listen, are there certain higher fees because of the risk appetite of that particular industry? Ask about if they will help with what's called payment card industry, or what's commonly called PCI compliant. Unfortunately, over the years, there has been some credit card hacks out there where I think Target was one of them, where all their credit cards or the cards that were used over a certain amount of time were exposed somehow. Some bad guy got in there, started looking at credit card numbers, expiration dates, names, and all that kind of fun stuff. So now PCI is a compliant, that's a regulation that merchant processors will help you get PCI, but it really helps educate you. What are you doing with all that data? Like, for example, the example I used earlier with that heating and air guy who was having his employees write down the card numbers and then driving it to the office. Not a great PCI compliant program right there, because that card number and is in the truck as the technician's driving back to the office. Not the most safe way of doing it. So most of the merchant processors will help you become PCI compliant. If you're not, if you deviate away from there, some merchant processors will actually charge much higher fees to get you to be PCI, to kind of kick you in the tail, to have you make some changes in your way of processing or handling cards. But the merchant processor will kind of help you get PCI compliant. Ask what type of contracts you're required to sign, if at all, for processing or for renting or purchasing equipment. Some processors will have year contracts, maybe a 2-year contract. Some are on a month-to-month. Some don't have contracts. Some do charge, if you do want to have a machine or a POS system, then there might be a contract for renting or buying some of those equipment. So certainly something to ask. Ask about different pricing options that best meet your need. The reason that you want to maybe talk to somebody is that you want to explain how you are going to accept cards and how can you lower the cost. Because as you've seen, the expense for this product can be pretty expensive. It can be anywhere from 2, 3, 4% of a sale goes just for the ability to accept a card. So it's certainly it is your right to ask about pricing options. And then last one here, some processors allow for what's called a surcharge or passing a surcharge onto your client for using a credit card, can't be debit card, as a form of payment. So surcharging is if as a merchant you have the right to increase the cost of your item and be very transparent when a credit card is being used. For example, left-hand side. This is something that I found myself because my wife and I took our son out to a restaurant, and he said, "Hey, this restaurant, I hear it's awesome, but you may want to bring cash because they charge for credit card usage." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay." So I went and actually for the first time in a long time went to an ITM here at the credit union and got some money out to go to this particular restaurant. So with this restaurant here, it clearly says, and I love the transparency here. Dear patrons, due to the increasing cost of all products and services as a result of COVID-19, we have had to switch our credit card processing company. All prices listed will reflect cash payments starting November of 2021. 3 3/4 is added to credit card transactions per our new merchant. I kind of disagree. It probably wasn't per the merchant. It was probably per him or the business owner, but that's a whole nother discussion. We recommend to pay cash and save. We apologize for any inconvenience. We did not collect a single cent on these fees. This allows us to avoid raising our prices. Thank you for understanding and for your continued support. So they have elected to do this surcharge, which is completely understandable. Restaurants are really hitting it hard when it comes to the inflation and raising prices and possibly losing clients and so forth. So in this case, my wife and I actually did bring cash. It did, however, force us to not have a second drink, if you know what I'm saying, because as I'm looking at it going, oh my God, I only have so much cash, and if I order another drink, it's gonna go above the cash limit. So you know what, I will hold off on that second drink, which certainly it did cost this merchant to lose a little bit of a sale. But in this case, we did pay with cash. He was on the bill. It did say, okay, here's your bill if you pay with cash, and here's your bill if you pay with some type of credit card. And I always want to highlight, this is only on credit cards. There's a regulation out there that merchants are not allowed to charge or surcharge for debit card transactions. The picture on the right is something that I just found on the internet. Clearly, it's their way of showing, hey, 3% credit card fee will be added to one card or pay cash with no fees. So that is your right. Once again, having a sales consultant or someone to talk to and maybe talk through that process, because you really have to kind of think about, okay, yeah, this is great. I'm going to charge my clients to accept these cards. Well, the question is, are you losing business because of it? So something you kind of have to balance. So here at GECU, we have several years ago when we were trying to find a company that we could partner with or refer business to when it comes to this merchant processing stuff, knowing that this industry changes all the time with surcharges, which is a brand new thing, with the way credit cards are handled or processed or what have you. So many years ago, we have partnered with a company by the name of Elavon, which is one of many merchant processors. And the reason that we chose them is that we feel like they are committed to providing as excellent merchant processing products and services to our business members. Elavon has a local sales consultant, his name is Ron, who will talk to anybody who has questions about maybe accepting cards. Ron wants to understand what your goals is with accepting cards, and will make suggestions and provide advice. Elavon does have a 24/7 service, which is extremely good. So if you want, there's a contact phone number there of our business services group, and we can certainly get you in contact with Ron or anybody over at Elavon. But like I said, if you search around, there are lots of other merchant processors out there. You just need to be comfortable with all the different things that we talked about earlier. So once again, that's all our contact information there. My information is there. Our business services support center that Janie is part of, all the information is there with their direct phone numbers and the email. And with that, I don't have anything else to do. Kelly, I'll pass it back to you to see if there's any questions.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Jason. So we'll go ahead and open up today's webinar for the Q&A portion. If you have any questions pertaining to merchant processing, go ahead and submit those using the question feature, and we'd be happy to answer those today. With that, we'll go ahead and jump into it. The first one is, if I start to accept cards to pay for my goods one way, how hard is it to add a different way?
Yeah, so it's really not that hard as long as you have either relationship or you know how to contact or work with your merchant processor. Once again, going back to that sales consultant, the person that kind of walked you through how to accept a card in the first place. And what I find very cool about Ron is that he tells me stories all the time that he was talking to someone who reached out to us, and then Ron started saying, hey, have you ever thought of accepting cards when your technicians go to the house? No, I really didn't think about that. So so if you start one way, it's really not that hard to start processing cards an additional way. So it just really depends on open communication and who you know how to get that set up later on down the road.
This next question is, how did you feel when the restaurant you dined at wanted to charge you a surcharge?
Yeah, when my son first told me about it, first off, it was a restaurant that he heard good things about, and of course wanted mom and dad to pay for it, so he recommended that place. And at first he was kind of taken back, like, yeah, I'm not sure why the heck that they're charging this higher cost. But me being in the industry, completely understood it. But I mean, personally, I understood it completely. Like I said, I mean, certainly I had a card in my wallet if I needed to use it, and if I really wanted that second drink, I probably could have done it. But I completely emphasize, or I empathize with the merchant. I understand. I mean, it is costly, and he's trying to keep his prices down. So I didn't mind paying with cash in that case. If I wanted that second drink, then I would have pulled out the credit card to pay for that, as well as paid the 3 3/4% rate. So, but I might not be that typical merchant or that typical consumer. Sometimes people might see that and get kind of ticked off or disappointed about it. So you just kind of have to kind of gauge it if you do look at setting up a surcharge program.
And then I think this is our last question. How quickly can I get set up with credit card processing?
Yeah, so how quickly? There are, as I said, there's a number of merchant processors out there. There is one big one that you can just find it, and it's very popular, which there is no approval process, which is both good and bad. It's good because you can be set up really quickly. For a fundraiser that I was involved with, we kind of forgot that we needed to accept a credit card within like 2 weeks of needing something for that event. So we went to that company, went online, got it set up within just a few days. we paid a little higher rate because of it and everything else. So, so to answer that particular question, you can be set up within a day or two, if even that. Some of the ones where then if you're going to start negotiating rates or you want to do POS or what have you, there's certainly much longer time to get all that. If you need to order hardware, that's one thing. If you need to start putting in information in a POS system, that's another. So it can be as short as getting set up within a day or two. But then if you want to be a little more, maybe make it worth it in terms of your cost or about the service level, it does take some time. Some merchant processors do have an approval process. Sometimes they will ask maybe for some financials, but that's where I think having multiple merchant processors or multiple places for you to kind of consider, I think that is important.
All right, well, thank you, Jason. That's going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cal.